For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sheila Barades. South Africa, the Good News CEO Steuart Pennington joins me in studio to discuss the new publication South Africa 20, for better or for worse. Welcome, Steuart.
Thank you, Sheila.
Now, there are 42 contributors to the book South Africa 20, for better or for worse. Why did the Good News publish this book?
You know, it's 20 years into our democracy, and I think this country is still bedeviled by what I like to call conventional wisdom madness. There's so many things that you hear all the time. Our university standards are dropping. South Africa's going to run out of water. Our productivity is the worst in the world. We're the most unequal society in the world.
We're going to be another Zimbabwe.
We're going to be another Zimbabwe. You hear it all the time. So what I did is I chose 25 such statements. And then I went to 42 people who are authorities in their field, who know about these topics and have written on them extensively. And I asked them to contribute, because better it comes from the horse's mouth than just be my opinion, you know. So that's why all our books really have had contributors who are well-known authorities in their field.
Can you give us a brief overview of what the book focuses on and what you hope the readers will gain from reading it?
Well, my passion is the South African narrative. I've tried to present this book in a way which is eminently readable. So it's not a book with page after page of text. It's got beautiful images, it's got fast facts, it's got editors' comments, it's got pull quotes, it's even got some cartoons by Madam and Eve. So I've tried to make it readable so that the reader will become more informed, so that when he's at a braai or at a dinner party and someone says it's not if we become Zimbabwe, it's when, yes, he'll say, no, hold on, you've got your facts wrong, yes, you know, and he'll challenge the conversation instead of acquiescing and going along with it.
Well, I think that's what we actually need, you know, somebody to stand up for it. Eh?
Yeah.
Or stand up for South Africa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please tell me about the contributors. Why did you choose these contributors specifically for the book?
Well, you know, these days with Google, you can find out about anything. So when I did the chapter on the Gini coefficient, for example, I mean, you know, for 20 years, people have been saying we have the highest level of inequality in the world. Our Gini coefficient is the worst in the world. But if you look at what's happened over the last 20 years in terms of social grants, in terms of access to electricity, access to housing, access to free water, access to schooling, that must have changed. And so when I Googled it, I came across a group of researchers at Natal University who argue that if you factor in all these things over the last 20 years, our Gini coefficient has come down considerably. And I asked them to write, and they were only too delighted to do so.
You mentioned the Gini coefficient as one of the focus points. The other problem is corruption. Corruption in South Africa seems to be endemic in most people's eyes. How do you think that this problem will best be dealt with?
Well, just on that subject, we've got David Lewis, who heads up Corruption Watch, writing the chapter on that. And it's one of the less positive chapters in the book. But his view is that there are a number of things that are happening which hopefully will result in a reduction in corruption. So I think when it comes to corruption, you know, if you think about our tax regime 20 years ago it was quite clever to talk at a dinner party about how you were nyekking the tax man.
Yes.
Now it's not clever at all because of what government's done because of the efficiency of SARS over the last 20 years. Well, I'm hoping we'll see a similar move in respect of corruption, that from an institutional point of view, a lot will be introduced that will curb corruption, and I'm hoping that will spread into society, and that people will take more and more responsibility for not being corrupt and for exposing corruption when it happens.
Obviously, because people fuel that corruption. If there's a demand for it, then people will supply.
For everyone who takes a bribe, there's someone who pays a bribe.
Exactly, exactly. Now, news stories in South Africa generally focus on the bad news. If bad news predominates, then what is the value of highlighting the good news stories?
Well, I think you have to start with a question around what is news. So to give an example, you'll recall that horrible day when that truck went through a stop street in Pinetown and 22 people were killed. On the same day, in Pinetown, a group of kids from a school won a global United Nations debate in New York around environmental sustainability. Now, the question is that news? Well, I think it is, but it doesn't get reported. So what we try and do with our website, and what I've tried to do with this book, is expose some of those things so that at the end of the day, people's narrative is balanced. I think balance is really critical. If your partner says to you every morning, "I think your hair looks greasy," and you're going flat out to make it not look greasy, eventually you'll give up. Because
or you'll start believing
Or you'll start believing it, exactly, yeah. So I'm trying to, through this book and through our website, to try and create a balanced narrative so people will celebrate the good while confronting the bad.
Yes.
I often say, to understand the good, you've really got to know about the bad. So knowing about the bad is important, but it's also equally important, and I use the word selectively, equally important, to know about the good.
Exactly, and also by looking at the good, you can maybe come up with solutions for the bad.
I think that's absolutely right. I think if you are inspired by the good, you have that much more energy to confront the bad.
How is the Good News website spreading the good news, and what is the best reaction you have had to one of your stories?
Okay, well, first of all, the website's been going for 10 years. It's sponsored by FNB, so I must thank them for their support over that period of time. It's read in 185 countries around the world. We have about 40,000 unique users, 20,000 newsletter subscribers, of which you are one.
Yes.
And about 25,000 Twitter followers. So it's out there. I've just done a mountain bike trip through the Karoo, and I met with 8 farmers in the driest part of South Africa. They all are subscribers. So it's playing a role in terms of keeping the narrative balanced. But I guess one of the best stories is I wrote a piece on restorative justice happening in near Umhlanga Rocks. And I got a mail from someone in New Zealand who said that he would like to donate a bust of Nelson Mandela to the organization that was running with this restorative justice program. And the organization said, look, we actually can't afford to bring this guy out. So I wrote that in my newsletter as well, that despite the fact that this bust, which was worth R250,000, had been offered, the organization concerned couldn't fly the sculptor out. The next day, I got an anonymous donation from someone in the United States saying, I'll fly him out.
Oh, wow.
Another story was about a young girl in Cape Town who started a kind of vaccination program for stray dogs in Paternoster, and I wrote up that story. And she wrote on the website that her next challenge was to move this program out to Worcester and to other parts of the country, but she needed R250,000 to buy another bakkie, to buy another mobile clinic, etc. And the next day there was a huge anonymous donation put into her account. So, wow. And those things happen all the time, by the way. People are inspired by good, and they're inspired by good deeds and by good people. And they want to, they want to be part of it.
Exactly. Well, Gandhi always used to say, be the change you want to see.
Precisely, yeah.
Well, that was Steuart Pennington, CEO of South Africa, The Good News, discussing the book South Africa 20, For Better or For Worse.